Hi and welcome. Today's video is about two different CQB methods to enter rooms. One is known as running the rabbit and the other one is pushing the threat. I will explain the ideas behind both approaches, what advantages and disadvantages I see, and I will of course show you how both techniques translate in door kickers, so you will know how and when to use them effectively. This is a series on CQB Micro Tactics in door kickers, where we look at real-world tactics and how those translate in the game. If that sounds interesting, go ahead and subscribe. In the previous episode, we looked at how to open doors as safely as possible, without getting an operator wounded or killed. Now, let's talk about how to get into the room as safely as possible. Before we get started, let me thank you for all the kind words in the comments. I was particularly happy that Dan, the co-founder and game designer at Killhouse Games, the indie studio making the game, wrote a comment and thanked me for the video, and also added something interesting that I had cut from the script to keep it shorter.
We have two directions of opening, okay? Push, pull. Push as of the door goes into the room, okay? Fun fact regarding corridors, normally by far doors will open into the rooms rather than away from the room.
As Dan pointed out, in the game, doors always open away from the user. Let me add a quick hint. If you play other games like Ready or Not or Tactical Assault VR, the door will almost always open towards the hinges. So if you can see the hinges, the door will most likely open towards you, and otherwise away from you. Now, let's dive into running rabbits and pushing threats. To get started, let's have a quick overview of both tactics and how they are different.
Today we're going to talk about a concept called running the rabbit. And what that really is presenting a moving target through a corner-fed room. This is the only thing we haven't seen is this little 35-40 degrees here. So Jason's going to go ahead and run the rabbit, look at his route, but look at his muzzle orientation. You going to hit it, Jay? Route is here. Muzzle orientation was still to the only thing we hadn't seen. We're going to show you another method called pushing the threat. If he was going to enter pushing the threat, go ahead and demo that, Jay. He's walking in toward the threat. That second guy is having to come in around him, and then if you were the threat, I have to earn my shot. Remember we talked about in other videos, I can't shoot from here. I have to be a meter off his muzzle.
As you see, pushing the threat means that the number one man comes into the room moving directly around the corner and towards the unknown, where we expect a threat. He pushes towards the threat. The number two man comes in right behind him and has to earn his shot before he can engage, so he avoids flagging his buddy and risking friendly fire. Before we dive deeper into running the rabbit and compare it, let's test what pushing the threat looks like in the game. In this test setup, we have two operators entering a corner-fed room. Number one pushes the threat, with number two right behind him earning his shot. There are two tangos waiting in the deep corner. As we run this test 10 times, the number one man is killed 7 times and wounded twice. Only 1 time out of 10 did both make it safely through the situation. I tried a few different paths for the number two man to earn his shot, and the best result I was able to get was the number one man getting killed 4 times and wounded 3 times, while both made it safely 3 times. That is a little better than the result I showed you earlier. But another attempt made things much worse instead, basically getting the number one man killed every time. So I decided to keep the initial results that I showed you earlier as a middle ground. Okay, so now let's take a closer look at running the rabbit, and afterwards we will test it in the game.
So I, as the second man in, have a path of least resistance that I can simply float. He is getting out of my way and I am occupying this space. And as that shooter, you're having to deal with 2 guns quicker and a moving lateral target as the initial stimulus. So when he moves that direction, human behavior generally leads you to track that moving target. Then you're presented with a second shooter.
To quickly summarize it, running the rabbit means that the first man into the room will quickly move along the wall and into the known, while keeping his muzzle and attention towards the unknown, where we expect a threat. To an observer inside the room, this presents a lateral moving target, which is more difficult to hit, and human behavior will usually lead to tracking that moving target. The number 2 man will pass the threshold right behind the number 1 and can engage a threat faster because he has a free direct path and does not need to maneuver to earn his shot. But does this actually work in the game? Let's find out. In this test, we have the exact same setup as before, but now the number 1 man will run the rabbit. As we repeat this 10 times, we did not suffer a single KIA. The number 1 man is wounded 3 times. Both operators make it safely 7 times. As we see from these test results, in the right situation in the game, it can be a lot safer and more effective to run the rabbit rather than pushing the threat. And even though there is no friendly fire in door kickers, shots will often be blocked if a friendly or neutral person is in the line of fire, so earning the shot is still relevant. We can conclude that running the rabbit is very effective in door kickers and a good tool for you to have in your box. Now, let's listen to Jared and Jason about some pros and cons.
A lot faster, right? And you'll see it with the timer. So what are the pros and cons? When Jason is moving in that lateral position, can you occupy just kind of like, Bigfoot step for me? His plates are not fully angled toward the shooter, so he might have a little bit of an armor gap here that's exposed. That's one con to it.
In the game, this isn't really an issue, because the armor is perfectly angled to where the operator is looking.
What if we had an obstacle blocking our route, and Jason could really only get to a limited penetration pod, and he runs his rabbit? Is he really creating a moving target there? So, user's choice. If you have a short route, it's really worth running the rabbit.
With only a short route into the room available, you remove the number 1 man's advantage of presenting a lateral moving target. The advantage you keep is getting a second gun in the fight faster.
Now, what would you say the cons are, Jason, of pushing the threat?
I'm occupying this space, so that becomes now a one-on-one gunfight for about 2.5 seconds. So that means I'm in the room by myself, dealing with whatever unknown threat or known threat that's over here, while my number 2 man has to possibly run through bullets to get around me and then collapse that sector of fire. So
yeah, and let's break that down step by step. So Jay, let's do push the threat. I want you to take 1 step into the room at a time. So he's taking 1 step in, take 1 more step and stop right there. Now I'm nut to butt, right? We want to be that distance equals time. 1 more step, Jay. And he starts getting engaged. We're right in line.
In all of my tests, the number 2 man was never hit, not even a single time. So this disadvantage does not seem to translate into the game.
So when you combine running the rabbit with a good pie or a pan technique or an exterior analysis of the room, and you're dealing with just that 35–40% of the room that's left, it's really, really effective. Anything you would add on that?
I'd like to add that running the rabbit puts the number 1 man at a higher risk than a solo limited penetration, where he has the chance to bail out quickly if needed. Once you run the rabbit, you are committed into the room, because the number 2 man is right behind him and blocks the route of retreat. I'd also like to stress that it's only a good solution for a corner-fed room, where we know that there is no threat in the forward direction where we are going. So we only need to worry about threats being located in a single direction to the side. In a scenario where we also have to keep forward security, pushing the threat allows the number 2 man to cover that flank for the 1 man. Choose the right tactic for the given situation. So here are your takeaways. Number 1, running the rabbit presents a moving target that is harder to hit. Number 2, running the rabbit gets 2 guns into the fight faster. And number 3, running the rabbit is an effective real-world tactic that translates very well into the game. As a final note, let me add that this is just one more tactic for you to use, and a good one when the mission demands speed. When you have time, you could do a solo limited penetration instead to assess the situation, and if the odds are not in your favor, you can bail out and prep it with a flashbang or frag grenade. Thinking about it, that might be an interesting topic for one of the next episodes. But this series is called Micro Tactics for a reason, so I'll keep it short and save that for later. Now that you have a few more tactics to choose from, you're authorized to engage the like button. Go kick some doors, have a good one, and see you next time.